Thank you everyone for being here today, especially you guys who just made it for the last part. See you, Brian. Well, I'll start off, as some of you are probably curious, what is the group that I represent? What is Paradigm Shift London? Going back to its roots and just sort of explaining it from there, Paradigm Shift London originated as an idea from my own desire to find people to talk to about things. That wasn't necessarily about specific spiritual things or anything in particular. I just wanted to find people who enjoyed engaging in conversation and learning more, and were open to the idea that maybe what we were being presented inside of our common institutions in our schools wasn't all there was. The idea that you could walk into a bookstore, you can do this anywhere. You can walk into a bookstore and you can find a plethora of information, of books upon books, of stuff that they just weren't teaching us in school, right? So from there, I started doing a lot of my own research, and I started coming across a lot of what is coined as parapsychology. And I was really interested in that, and I was just kind of interested in the idea of psychic phenomenon, and even getting into conspiracy type theory, and even aliens and UFOs and you name it, right? It was all just information for me. That's how I saw it. Everything is information, and what you do with it is up to you. So I had all this information, but I didn't really have too many people to talk to about it. So when I created the Paradigm Shift group, basically I wanted to create it so I could find other people who were interested in this type of stuff, who were almost in the same boat as me, maybe they were at home on their computer doing all this research and stuff on their spare time, but outside of that, when they go to school or when they're at work, they probably never really got into the habit of talking about these subjects. So when I created the club within the College of Fanshawe, I did that in 2009, and basically had some guest speakers come in, and we just sort of had casual social gatherings, we called them, and those usually included free punch and pie, which was a pretty big part of Paradigm Shift, to be honest, because when you're dealing with youth, I usually find that sometimes it's hard to convince them to come out to something that they're uncertain about, but if you throw some free punch and pie in there, then it helps, it adds a level of humor, and it adds a level of pie that makes it just, people will come out even just for the pie, and they'll stick around for the philosophical insight, or whatever you want to call it, right? So, from there, the group has expanded from Paradigm Shift Fanshawe into Paradigm Shift London, and that just happened over the last summer. Obviously, since the school year ended, I wanted to take it outside of the school and just expand it into the community. No longer being focused simply on the youth within the college, but understanding and accepting the fact that there's lots of people who weren't students in college who are probably, still equally as interested as myself and the other people who would love to come out to circles like these and to take part. And it's great because even till today, we do get a wide range of people coming in, which is something that I really am privileged. I love the fact that there's a lady here earlier who I was talking to, Sophia, and she's been out to some of our meetings, and she keeps saying, oh, it's an honor for me to be in the presence of you guys and listen to you guys talk. And for me, I'm just oh, well, it's an honor for you to be here listening to us, right? So it's this mutual gratitude that you get, which is really unique in that sense. So basically, what Paradigm Shift London is now, it's just, along with being a media hub, which is why the cameras are filming now, it's important for the documentation process to occur, because where we are now, we have to use the tools to accelerate what we're trying to do. Whereas back in the day, if a person wanted to achieve enlightenment, maybe they would go up to a mountain and meditate for 5 years, and that would be it, right? And then they would come down, and it would just be kind of word of mouth sort of thing. Whereas now, things are happening faster, so we have to use the tools that are at our hands. And it's cool that an event like this happens, but unfortunately, there's thousands of other people who are on the internet right now, who live in other parts of the world, who just can't be here because it's geographical happenstance. So part of Paradigm Shift is the documentation of what is evidently occurring right here on this earth, which is the evolution of consciousness. So that's part of what it is, as well as being the community. And the community is the core of it, because as much as I am here sitting and representing Paradigm Shift Fanshawe, by no means do I represent the people within Paradigm Shift Fanshawe. And what I mean by that is that I speak from my own heart, and the people in Paradigm Shift Fanshawe do that equally from their own heart as well, right? So everybody within Paradigm Shift Fanshawe like is their own facet, you know, meaning people might come into a meeting, we have all this conversation, but then as soon as we leave that meeting, individually, like one of those people might go and they might talk to someone else, and then that in itself sort of like creates like a whole new conversation, right? What's something that I have no control over whatsoever, which is the idea, because I don't want to tell people to believe anything, you know? Like it's not me saying like, oh, like this is what I believe, blah, 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 like push it on people, right? Like that's kind of what religion does, and that's kind of what I was trying to move away from, right? So in that sense, for me, a lot of my own experience and my own knowledge and insight came from connecting the dots through my own experience. So what I want the group to do is to encourage people to connect the dots in their own way. So what I can do as a facilitator, and as well as anybody else in the group has the equal amount of ability to do this too, is say, look, here's a piece of information. You know, like it could be something off the internet, it could be a book or whatever. They take that piece of information and then we like together we start looking at it and we start adding our own insight to it, you know, and then like people are adding in like their own opinions and from there, like together as a group, we understand that we don't know everything, but if we can start talking about what we don't know and what we're trying to figure out, then it's going to help. It's just going to help us start connecting those dots. And it's really, really cool from having gone through my own experience when things start clicking. And you know, for me, like some of the things that like just really started to click was like even going back to the idea of like reincarnation. Like there was a time where reincarnation for me, like I was like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense or whatever, right? But then I started like getting into this idea that like, oh, okay, well, you know, like if we're more than just our physical bodies, and that encompasses this idea of what people may call a soul, so then we're actually souls. So in that sense, as soul, we actually exist on higher dimensional planes, so to speak, which is more of like the etheric planes. And then through that, we crystallize into this reality. And like this physical reality is like the dense form, but it's not all there is, right? So from that sense, I'm like, okay, well, if this isn't all there is, then that means we come from somewhere else. So when we're in that other state, what is that other state? And then when I started getting into the idea of dream theory, I was like, whoa, wait a second, like that other state is pretty much what we're going through when we're dreaming, is it not? So then from there, it was just this idea of like, well, hold on, like that's pretty cool. So I mean, that kind of means that like this, what I am right now, like this is just like my physical vehicle, right? Whereas like my consciousness, my soul, is kind of like something that, you know, like people say, like it's eternal, it exists outside of us or whatever, right? It goes on from like life to life to life. So again, tying back into the idea of reincarnation, and there was a talk here earlier today about the Akashic Records, and if some of you heard, the lady here, she was mentioning the idea that before this life, we actually set up like a contract for what we want to do when we come into this life. You know, before we incarnate, we actually choose who our parents are going to be, what mission, like what things we want to try and learn, because there is no like set guarantee, like there is free choice. But at the same time, there is a path that we've laid out ahead of ourselves that we can sort of choose to follow. And that path is always going to be there. And in traditional sense, that path can be referred to as our dharma. And karma is the energy that tries to keep us on that path. Now, like maybe a bit different now how people traditionally think of karma and dharma. But again, dharma is the path that we set out ahead of ourselves before we came into this life. And that path is there for us to find fulfillment as a soul. That path is there for us to accomplish the objectives that we set out for ourselves, saying, you know, like I want to learn this, I want to meet this person, I want to accomplish this. And then when we come into this life, part of our job is to actually remember what that was, that we actually agreed that we were going to try to learn when we came here. Now, there's no guarantee that we will learn it, right? So in that sense, it's up to the individual to actually take responsibility and to accept the fact that free will is part of this reality, meaning that you can choose to be lazy at any point. You can choose to just be like, whatever, you know, I don't care, whatever, that's cool. You can do that, right? But then you can choose to be ambitious, and you can choose to say, you know, like I want to find out what there is. Like I want to know more. I want to like go somewhere and achieve fulfillment, right? So some people, they may actually go through a whole life and accomplish very few of their life goals, you know, the things that they set out before in a previous life. And then in a kind of a reincarnation sense, they may go through an entire life, learn very few lessons, and then by the time they get to their next life, they're still trying to learn the lessons that they didn't learn in the previous life, and then they may just repeat that cycle. And it's going to take them a while until they start to realize, like, hey, wait a second, I'm in control here. Like, I can actually take control, and I can start, like, manifesting my own reality. And from there, they can start, like, accelerating their soul, like, their life path, or, like, you know, like, as a soul, they can start, like, evolving in a literal sense, because there's nothing that one person can do that, like, I don't think isn't in all of us in that sense. So, you know, when you hear people talking about like clairvoyance, clairsentience, psychic ability, telepathy, you know, like being able to astral project, lucid dreaming, all that, like that's something that's part of the human experience, and it's something that we can all tap into because we are privileged in the sense that we are here experiencing this life as humans, you know, like we didn't get the short end of the stick when you think about it, you know, like not to say like, oh, I wouldn't love to be an animal or whatever, but yeah, we were put in a circumstance where there's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders, but there's also a lot of potential. And especially right now in terms of, you know, what's happening with the whole like consciousness shifting, 2012, whatever you want to, you know, if you want to put a number on that, that's fine. But what my best guess, and again, like don't believe anything I say, right? This is just from my own experience, but my best guess is that like in a cosmic breath sort of way, the universe is constantly coming into this process of learning and unlearning itself. Meaning it will go through a process where it remembers people are, so to speak, like enlightened. They understand their connection to nature. They understand their connection to source. They understand how to manifest a reality. And then over time, it just sort of falls out of that. And then it'll come back into it. Where we are right now, like we're coming back into it. But say like this is like back in the day, so it would be like, you know, like coming into it, going out of it, coming into it. But as it goes forward, it starts to increase. And say this is like the length of time. Where we are right now, we're doing like a full cycle within like the shortest amount of time that's ever occurred. Whereas in the past, like the whole like coming into enlightenment, falling out of it thing would have taken like, you know, thousands of years. And like this is going like way back, like even to like, if you want to like take into account like the whole like Atlantean sort of thing, like that happened then. And what happened then is happening now, just on a different time schedule, so to speak, in a very short amount of time. And that's why what you're going to notice within the next coming years is more potential for you as an individual to manifest your own reality. Whereas in the past, it might have taken, if you put out a thought, it might have taken several months for it to come back to you. Now, if you put out a thought, it's going to be coming back to you very, very rapidly. But again, if it's, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what thoughts you're putting out, right? If you're putting out negative thoughts, they're going to come back to you just as fast, and then you're going to have to like deal with that. Now, at the same time, if you're putting out positive thoughts, if you're saying, you know, like I want to find fulfillment, I want to do this, the universe is full force. Like it like where it is right now, like even if it were to just stay where it is right now, like there is enough potential for us to like have like crazy experiences. But the idea that it's going to continue accelerating is kind of, not to say daunting, but just kind of incredibly inspiring when you think about the potential that is at our fingertips in that sense. So we as individuals are co-conscious creators of this reality. We are more than just our physical bodies. You know, like what we see here is the physical reality, like isn't all there is. Like this reality is not as cut and dry as it appears to be. For some people, that's kind of a hard thing for them to wrap their head around because we spend so much of our time walking through this life and everything like that. one of the ways that you can experience it is through dreams and all that, and there's other methods as well, meditation and stuff. You can actually start getting into these like higher realms of consciousness, so to speak. But again, like anything, it actually does take practice. Like the universe isn't just going to say like, oh, do you want to experience like something like incredibly profound and mystical? Like, well, here you go. Like, no, you have to sort of approach it with respect. I find to be greedy is not a good thing in the long run. So you always want to like have respect for the universe, have respect for what you're asking, have respect for the people around you, in the sense that you don't want to just be asking for like something for yourself in the terms of like materialism or whatever, right? So right now, what the best thing that we can do is ask out of benevolence, meaning do something for the sake of others. And through that act of giving, you receive through that collective growth. So I guess going back to paradigm shift, that's kind of what it's about. It's about empowerment, I would say, without a doubt, because there definitely is a wealth of knowledge out there, and as people start to read and research this knowledge for themselves, they'll start to get it, they'll start to connect their own dots, and as they start to put into practice, that being the most important thing, because, I can't stress this enough. If you're interested in meditation, don't just read a book on it. Go meditate, right? Like that's what you got to do. Like there actually is like a commitment that you have to make if you want something, if you want that next level out of it, right? So again, like paradigm shift is about empowerment, and this is something that, I don't think it's like incredibly like. Yeah, I understand that the fact that it is kind of uncommon, so to speak, like why aren't they teaching this stuff in schools, right? Well, that's just the system that we're in. But at the same time, like that is kind of it is kind of just an encouraging factor to say to be able to recognize that like, hey, something's wrong with our system. That's step one. What do we want to change about it? And then when we can recognize what we want to change and actually put forth that intent, then we'll be able to get it back. So this is something that's probably going to take a while. This expo's, the title of the panel discussion was like looking to 2030. 2030 seems like a long time away, but if things continue to accelerate and, if things like just aren't too catastrophic or whatever, like there is potential to make a difference in this world. And even if you're not too certain that you're doing it for yourself, do it for your children, do it for your children's children, right? One thing that was sort of like a paradigm shifting moment for me was this idea that, again, going back to this idea of reincarnation, well, hey, if this whole reincarnation thing is true, then that means that I can help create a future that theoretically I can be born back into again, which for me was a very, very cool thought, right? So I'm just like, okay, I have this dream of like flying cars and future cities and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll be around to see it, maybe I won't. But theoretically, if I put forth my best effort, theoretically I could choose. Because again, when we're between lives, we're actually like aware, it's like as consciousness about like sort of in a non-temporal sense about like what's still going on here. So in that sense, like loved ones who have passed on, they are still with us. And again, don't believe anything I'm saying, right? Based on my own experience though, like death is not the end. If anything, death is very similar to birth in the sense that what we are doing here on this physical plane is actually developing our soul personality. Like a soul is almost like an identity, like a personality. So we're developing this personality in this lifetime so that when the moment comes where we move on, when we pass on, to maintain that consciousness into the next step is really an important thing, because to be able to exist on the higher etheric realms, like as this conscious self, is a really cool idea, right? So I mean, for me, like my grandfather has passed on, as well as like other relatives in my family, but I had this just innate feeling because I was very close to him that there is more that he can do to assist me having passed on than he was capable of doing stuck in a wheelchair at his house. And in a way, I think he understood that too, because like his passing was fairly, it wasn't like it happened, but it wasn't like incredibly it happened, and then for me, like I wasn't incredibly distraught about it. I was just like, all right, you know, like this is where we're at right now. So I mean, so sometimes I'll take those moments in my meditation to use my imagination and to actually put forth gratitude to the people who are still with me in spirit, to actually take the time to like hug my grandfather in my imagination. Now, is that my imagination? Well, my imagination is creating a reality in itself. So who's to say that's not real, right? Because everything is equally unreal. And if you can sort of wrap your head around that, then you can sort of realize that thoughts create energy, emotions, we're all interconnected and stuff like that. So by being here today, by being here in this room, like that's making a big difference. Like I hope by you sitting here, not just now, but by being here earlier today, like you're gonna take this energy, you're gonna take all this like insight, and you're gonna be able to like bring it with you to wherever you are going on your life path. And I hope that you inspire people to inspire other people, because that's really what it's all about, and ripples create waves. So I think I'm out of time. I'll wrap it up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.